Welcome back, guys. Today is day 5, our final session of our free week in software quality assurance testing. I want to thank everybody for consistent participation and for being active, especially those who are asking questions and answering the questions. This is a good part of being a student, and that's something that we expect from all the students during the bootcamp as well. All right, let's take a look what we have been going throughout the week. Lesson 1, we learned about testing. We learned about requirements, documentation, right? We looked into a sample document called functional requirement document. There are many different types of documentation in testing. And we'll cover most of them, depending on how the team is managing software development process. There are different types of models or methodologies to manage software development lifecycle, and we'll cover that as part of the bootcamp. But we have some idea by now what testing is, how to perform testing, and what test cases, right? We actually created one test case and executed test case in a test management tool called Azure DevOps. So you see, by now you're already familiar with one of the test management tools. It's not that complex. Day 2, we learned about issues. The very reason why testing exists, why QA testers are hired by companies, by large companies. And we also looked into some of the examples of software failures that costed millions of dollars for organizations such as including NASA and also financial institutions such as banks or cryptocurrency companies. So it's very important, and companies realize that they have to prevent the defects. They have to prevent rather than detect, so that they can catch the defects before they end up in the hands of the end users, actual users in production, right? There are many environments when you're developing a software, such as QA environment, development environment, and the final environment is what we refer to as a production environment, right? We don't want to have issues leaked into production environment, right? So we created our bug report. You saw it. We interacted with the developer. We assigned the bug to a developer, and the developer had to fix it and assign it back to us. And as a tester, we retested and closed the bug report, again in the Azure DevOps tool. There are other tools too. As part of the bootcamp, we cover Jira as well, so it's one of the widely popular tools. Day 3, we looked into the back end of the software, or a data layer of the software, that is SQL, right? We understood that SQL stands for Structured Query Language. So it's a query language. It's not a programming language. It is structured in an English-like pattern. So anyone, pretty much, if you pay close attention and think logically, you can get the hang of it. It's nothing complex, not a rocket science. So day 4, yesterday, we looked into our first programming language, which is Python. Python as being known as a beginner-friendly programming language, and at the same time, very, very, very powerful. Today, our final session of our free week, we're going to utilize Python and one of its libraries. I'll talk about libraries in a minute, to interact with the web application, right? So we'll use all our powers to launch the browser and then do some cool stuff on the browser. basically, right? And in general, we'll talk about test automation too. Okay, so let's get going. Here's some of the specific things that you will accomplish today. We're going to launch the browser automatically using Python. We're going to go to a specific web address, right? When we say web address, we mean such as google.com or amazon.com. That's the address of the web applications. Then we're going to find the elements on the web page, right? So if you want to interact with the elements, so you need to find those elements, right? So I'll show you how to find those elements. Then after we find the elements, we can input some username, a password, and we can also click on it, right? That's a normal flow. And we'll close the browser. So we open the browser, we'll close the browser. We can also take some screenshots along the way. All right, so this is some of the actions that we can take today. All right, now that brings us to an important question of why automate testing, right? We can do testing manually, right? Why would we automate? The answer is simple. It's about three factors, basically. It's about time, money, and resources. So companies are short in time, short in resources. Budget is always an issue. There's always a budget constraint, especially whenever there's such a trend or a panic about a crisis. So companies start shrinking and they start thinking more about saving and being more economical and being more efficient. And these days actually is exactly that. We have that kind of trend. So all of the companies are trying to automate the testing process and the business process as well, as much as possible. Okay, so accordingly, they're looking for automation testers, basically. That's the message here, right? So it's very simple. They want to save money, they want to save time and resources. When we say resources, we're talking about people, right? So what exactly do we automate? When we say let's automate automated testing, what exactly is being automated in testing? First of all, test steps. You remember the test steps that we created, right? When we were creating our manual test cases, we had some steps such as launch the browser, go to a web page, and then input username, input password. Those are the steps. Those are what we call as test steps. One test case can have many test steps, to put it in a simple way, right? So those test steps or actions that you as a tester usually perform can be and should be automated in the best case scenario, so that if you want to rerun, if you want to re-execute the same test case again in the future, so that you don't have to do it manually, right? You can do it manually one time, maybe twice, but if you're planning to rerun this test case again and again in the future, it's best if you automate that. And there's a type of testing called regression testing. Regression testing, the word regression means basically getting worse, right? So if application can actually get worse, or some unexpected issues can be introduced into the application whenever the application code is touched. When the developer is trying to fix something, they might accidentally break something else. That's what we call as a regression issue, right? And this is when the test automation comes into picture, right? So because we're using test automation, you can easily rerun those test cases that passed already. You can rerun the test case that already passed again and again. After each time there's a defect fix, each time developer fixes something, you should be concerned because there's a risk that while they were fixing, they actually broke something else. Make sense? That's what we call as regression testing. And regression testing nowadays is always covered by automated testing. Okay, so regression test cases, they have to be converted from manual into automation. What else do we automate? Apart from steps, right? Test steps. We automate the expected and actual comparison. Remember we talked about expected condition and actual results, or expected versus reality or actual behavior of the application during the first lesson. That comparison usually done visually, right? So you as a manual tester, you would just look at the web page or the application or mobile app, and then you compare visually as a human being, and you make a conclusion. Okay, I see this expected message, so test case passed. Or, oh, I don't see that, or I'm getting an error message, test case should fail. So you do this manually, but the same comparison can be done automatically. Okay. What else we automate? We automate taking screenshots. You know how time consuming it is to take screenshots when you're performing manual testing? Some companies take screenshots, some companies don't take screenshots for every test case because it is very time consuming. And repetitive work, right? You're always opening the snipping tool, taking a screenshot, saving it somewhere, giving a name to your file. That is time consuming. Accordingly, so that this kind of repetitive work can be automated, and test automation can easily take screenshots. All right, pass or fail test status. This has to be automated. At the end of your test case execution, you make a decision, right? Okay, I can pass my test case or I can fail my test case, depending on the result of your test case execution, right? And that particular step can also be automated. So you can automatically make a decision, pass or fail, and set the status of the test case as pass or fail. You can also generate reports. What are reports, right? In interviews and in actual interviews, as this question is also asked. So what kind of, do you generate any test summary report, test case execution reports? So what are those? Report is part of business process all the time, right? Someone higher standing, they need to get some update about the process, about how things are going. So you need to provide a status update, some sort of report saying, okay, I had 100 test cases and 50% of them executed, some of them failed, right? What percentage failed? So you need to provide some update. Or I have 10 defects open currently and 5 fixed. So that kind of numbers are the test reports, which can also be automatically generated. All right. That brings us to another important concept that we need to understand in order to be able to interact with the application components, right? So web elements, or simply elements. What are the elements? Elements are the building blocks of any web application. It's a building blocks of any web application. Web applications building blocks are created in or using what we call as HTML. And I'm going to show you in a minute. It's nothing complex. It's probably one of the easiest concepts to learn, the HTML. It is like a skeleton of the page. Okay, so every element you see is created pretty much using the HTML blocks, and they're like Lego blocks pretty much. Okay, so with the HTML blocks, let me actually show you a quick example of what we mean when we say web elements. What do we mean when we say web elements? So we can go to the website that we were looking into the other day, right? This particular website, let's say we're going to this particular website, and I want to look into the HTML structure of this page. So it's very easy. You would just go ahead and right click anywhere, pretty much anywhere on the page, and click inspect. Right click and then click inspect. So as soon as you do an inspection, pretty much on the web page, what is displayed is developer tools of the browser. This is called as a developer tools, or the part of the browser that's usually hidden from a regular user, and developers or the testers would use it extensively, especially automation testers. So what you're looking here is the HTML structure of the page. As you can see, if I hover over, if I keep going, every single element is getting highlighted pretty much on the page. Okay, so every element is in, elements can be inside another elements. There's this parent and child type of relationship here. So the largest element, or the most I would say container, right? Biggest container here would be the body, right? On top of it, there's like a head element, but everything that you interact with would be mostly inside the body element, which kind of makes sense. It's the body of the application, right? Inside the body element, you would have a bunch of elements. And there's also this this particular tool here on the left-hand side. It's called as an element locator, right? Or object spy, call it whichever way that would make sense. If you click on it, then you start going to elements, right? See, it would actually find that element. Just pay attention to the below in the HTML part of the browser as well. It is actually finding that particular element for me. See, so this header, or this username, or this particular button, I can find this button too. If I click on it, it would highlight this particular element for me. So now you can see that I found this element in HTML skeleton, in the structure of the application. Okay, nothing complex there. Whatever I showed you here is not a rocket science. Again, it's just a simple tool that you're basically just clicking and just going through. It's like a child asking with with pointing to elements, like, what is this? What is this element? And the browser is giving you a response. Okay, this is a button, and this is an input, and so on, right? All right, so we have some idea. We have some idea about the HTML structure of the page, right? Of the web elements. So the next important thing that we want to look into is what we're going to learn today. Today, you will learn to launch the browser. You will go to a web page, a particular web address. You will find the elements, those elements that we were looking into, we were inspecting or spying on, right? Those particular elements. We'll get to them, we'll find them, and then we'll start performing some actions on them. That's the purpose, basically. So what kind of tools or technology are we planning to use? we're going to use Python. We're going to use what's called as Selenium library of Python. Selenium library of Python, and text editor or code editor, Visual Studio Code. Okay, so those three things basically, and with those three tools, you can do a lot of useful things for test automation basically. Now let's talk about the library here for a second. When I say Selenium library, right? What is a library? Library is basically, if you ever played a game, initially you have a basic standards or abilities or functionalities in a game, right? And as you start playing, then you can power up. You can get some additional powers, like now you can fly, or you can have like a magnet and so on, right? Those are called as the power ups in games, if you play games. So now libraries are like power ups for the programming languages. So initially, when you install, and we will help you to install every tool and the programming language Python on your computer, initially you will have the basic standard features or functionalities or abilities of Python. But then you're going to need some additional power-ups, additional functionalities. In that case, we need to download and install the libraries, and one of those libraries is called a Selenium. The purpose of this particular library, Selenium, is to interact with the browser. Okay, so Python itself cannot just go ahead and interact with anything at once. Therefore, there are libraries, and Selenium is that particular library that's here to interact with the browser. All right, so let's get going. We're going to take a look into the Visual Studio Code first. Okay, so this is a Visual Studio Code that you're looking at. What you have in the left-hand side is where you create and manage your files. Okay, so left-hand side, this is called as an explorer, and here you can create new files and new folders and manage. So as part of the bootcamp, we create test automation frameworks, and everything basically will be handled. All the files and folders will be created right here in the left-hand side. So what you have here on top, right, is your code editor. This is where you write your Python code, your scripts, and then you can execute them. There are different ways of executing them. And what you have at the bottom is a terminal. That's where you see the results. So that's the overall walkthrough of the tool. You'll get used to this tool as you start doing exercises. During each session of our class, every student will be asked to continuously perform tasks. Now, free week is more like a webinar type of session, right? It's in a webinar mode. So, there's one person explaining to you, and you're mostly in a listen-only mode, and you can put your answers in the chat. But in the actual bootcamp, when we start in September 1st, it's not a webinar, it's more like a meeting. It's a meeting where I can see everyone, and then we can, you're all unmuted, and you can, you will be asked to speak about the previous session, previous class, and the topic, and also continuously for every task, every function that we learn, you will be asked to perform a specific task, and then submit. Continuously, you're submitting, and it's being checked. And then we're discussing together if you run into any issues. So that's interactive. With that, what I'm trying to say is that you will get the hang of any tool that we're demonstrating today. especially Visual Studio Code. Alrighty. What we have on top here, right here, is the way that we are actually getting some power-ups. Let's put it that way for now. Okay, we're not going to complicate the learning process today. So this is us trying to get some additional abilities from Selenium library so that we can interact with the browser. All right. So now what we're going to do now is we're going to run this particular file. The name of my file is freeweek.py. Any Python file ends with .py extension, right? And to run the Python file, there are different ways of running it, but one efficient way of running it in interactive mode would be py, and then you just put a space and -i. I stands for interactive, and we'll just put in the name of the file and hit enter. Okay, so what we just did was we entered into an interactive mode with Python. So here, right here, now this pretty much my terminal also became like a code editor. It became like a code editor. Okay, so right here in the code editor, or inside the terminal, we'll start creating a new browser. We'll create a new browser. When I say we'll create a new browser, we'll create a new instance of the browser. So we'll give it a name. Remember, yesterday we created some variables, right? We created a variable called age and message. One of them was a string, the other one was an integer. So just like that, we're going to create a new variable, and we will give it a name of a browser because we're creating a new browser. Okay, so WebDriver right here is the power up, as I said earlier, that we just imported, we took or inherited from the Selenium library. Okay, and this is going to help us to launch the Firefox browser. You can launch Chrome or Edge or any other browser. There's some additional setup that needs to be done to do that on your computer. You will receive all the instructions as part of the bootcamp. So now let's pay attention. I'm going to go ahead and run this, right? So all I have is a browser equals WebDriver.Firefox. So we're going to go ahead and run and give it some time. And pay attention what I have here, right? So it just launched the Firefox browser for me. If you look into right here at the beginning of the search bar, you will see this little icon of a robot. It says browser is under remote control. So it means that this particular browser right now is being managed by the browser is being managed by a script, by an automation tool. Okay, so that's what it means. All right. So with that, now what we did was we automatically launched the browser. This is usually one of the manual steps, right? We did automatically launch the Firefox. Now let's see if we can control that browser that we have on the right-hand side using the script in the left-hand side. First thing I want to check is what type of browser I'm dealing with, and that is an attribute or like a value of the browser, right? And it's very intuitive in its name. So browser name. What's the name of the browser? Take a look at the answer. It's Firefox, right? So the name of the browser that we're dealing with, that we're working with, is Firefox. Okay, so this is the command that I typed in, and this is the answer that I received. again, let me show you this. Browser.name, you hit enter, you get the answer as a Firefox. So where did it come from? It's coming from that particular browser. Okay. Now, what do you usually do when you launch the browser? You usually get to a specific website, right? A specific website. So let's try to get to some website, some web address. Where do we usually go? We go to Google, right? So let's try to go to Google. So we'll say browser.get, right? Not browser.go. Go would probably also make sense, but the way that it's programmed or it's prepared for you as part of the library is that there are some keywords that you need to memorize. You need to keep that in mind. Just like, we talked about syntax and vocabulary of a language yesterday, right? So learning Python is like learning any foreign language. So there are going to be some keywords that you need to memorize. There's no way around it. So that name right here is one of the keywords, right? So browser.name. Now you know that this is how you can get the name of the browser. Browser.get is another keyword, and this is more like an action, right? Because this is going to take you to a particular web page. Now pay attention, I'm going to put in some single quotes here, right? Why am I putting a single quote here? Because I'm about to enter the address, web address of Google, right? I'm about to enter the web address of Google. So I'm going to get this web address right here. Let me copy it from the actual place so that I don't have to type it in, and place it right here. So this is what we call as a web address, guys, right? If you're completely new to technology, there is a term specific abbreviation for this, that is URL. We refer to the web address as URL, okay? URL. So it starts with URL, or the web address usually starts with the HTTPS, and you have the colon, // and www and the rest of it. Okay, so now I'm going to hit enter, and my expectation is I'm expecting that this browser has to go ahead and go to a Google, and which it did, right? You can see that as soon as I hit enter, it went to google.com. So we basically automated that step as well. Not so difficult, right? Alrighty, so stay signed out here. Now, let's see if we can get to another web page as well, right? Just to see that it is working, right? Browser.get, and this time we're going to enter another address, and let me get that address right here. This is the web application that we will be interacting with as well. So this time I want this to go to another web page. Here we go. See that? Now we just jumped to another web page, which is a Swag Labs shopping web page where we did some manual testing the other day. What you can also get, some additional information that you can get from the browser, is you can get the current address, the current URL. So when I type in browser.current URL and hit enter, it will return the current URL. You see, the current URL, the current address, is this particular address, right? Right. So you could check that, you could verify that as well. How about the title that you see on the browser tab? You see on top of every tab there is usually a title of the page. You can see the title of the page right here is Swag and then space Labs. So we could get that too. you say browser.title. Also makes sense, right? And I hit enter, you can see the result right here. Browser.title is Swag Labs. Okay. All right. So how about this back button? How about the back button? Can we automate the back button too? Can we go back? We can. And you may guess the keyword is back. So I can say browser.back. But just pay attention to the parentheses too. Okay. So whenever you are dealing with anything that's an action, it follows with a parenthesis. If it's an action, then it has to be a parenthesis. Okay, so it just went back. You see? If I say browser dot forward, you might have guessed it's going to go again to the previous page, right? So you can go back and forward, and do not forget the parenthesis. If you pay attention to the other information, such as more static information, such as just an info, but it's not an action, such as the name of the browser, you do not use parentheses. You don't use parentheses because those are what we refer to as variables, or a better term would be attributes. Attributes, or more like a description, right? Descriptive information about the web page. So it's a name or its current URL, right? As you can see, I don't put any parentheses because it's not an action. But if you're performing any action, like go to a web page or go back or go forward, each time you have to use parentheses. Okay. All right. So another interesting concept is you can also refresh. See that? It just refreshed. Browser.refresh. You can do that too. Okay. All right. So, so here's some questions. So browser. So what is the difference between the title and name? Okay, so good question. So the difference between the title and the name. Name of the browser is basically a type of browser that you are using. Type of browser. So how many browsers do we know? Like we usually use Firefox or Chrome or Edge or Safari, right? So if in this particular case it's Firefox. So if I say browser.name, that will be the type of browser. That's a Firefox. Title would be what you see on top of every tab, right? You see that there's a Swag Labs right here. It's a title of the page basically. Okay, and to get that, we type in browser.title. Okay, now imagine if you had a specific requirement that the browsers or this web page title is supposed to be Swag Labs, right? It shouldn't be some sort of error, or it shouldn't be blank. It should be Swag Labs, right? So you have to test it. So in this case, you could pretty much check. You could compare what you have, this browser.title. You can compare it with your expectation, right? It has to be Swag Labs. You see that there's a difference between single equation sign and double equation sign. Single equal sign is here to take a value and then put it into a container, basically. Okay, just like to create a variable. I explained the variable yesterday. It's basically on the left-hand side, you have the name of the variable. On the right-hand side from the equation sign, you have the value that you want to put into the container, right? So that's what the single equal sign does. But if you use double equal sign, that means you're comparing something. You are comparing something, and it returns either true or false. Okay. So as you can see, it says that's true, that is correct. Browser's title or the title of this particular page is SwagLab. That's true. And if I were to say it is Google, right? It would return false. The browser's title is not Google. Okay. So if we were to go to Google again, right? Let's go to google.com. So browser.get and then the web address. So we're going to jump to Google. We're going to jump to google.com, and then let's try to get the title again. Okay. So we'll say browser.title, and you can see it returned as Google. Okay, so because you can see on top right here that it is Google. Okay. All right. Now that we learned so far how to launch the browser and get to a web page, right? How about getting to finding a particular element and then performing some actions on that? We can pretty much start from this particular element, which is the search bar, right? To find the element, we need to inspect it first. So let's go ahead, right click, inspect. And so you're going to see a bunch of data here, information, and we're going to learn how to find the important information, how to get the important information within this element. And one of the ways to uniquely identify the element is to identify it by its name. As you can see within this, I know this might be like too much information that you're looking at right now, but what I'm seeing right here is that it has a name that's equal to a letter Q right here. See that? It says name is equal to Q. So what we're going to do on the left-hand side is that we will say, we'll create a new variable called search field, and we're going to make it equal to, we'll say browser dot find element. Pretty much everything is logical. Okay, so within the browser, find element. All right, so let's find element within the browser. That's what we're typing, right? Anything that you're writing in code, try to make sense out of it. Okay, so browser dot find element. Okay, now elements can be found by specific features or attributes, right? By its description. So we are searching or we're finding it by its name. So by its name, and the name is Q. Doesn't matter. This is how they code it. Again, we didn't develop it. We're not the developers. Developers decided to code it that way. So we're going to go ahead and find it that way. Okay. So as you can see here, search field is equal to this particular, we're finding the search field using its name. Now that we have the search field, we can enter some value there. To enter text into a search field or into an input field, you will use send keys method. Send keys. It's like send keyboard values, right? As if you're pressing your keyboard. That's the relation, or that's idea here. So again, search field dot send keys, and we can put in, let's say, as that interview questions, and hit enter. Did you see what happened? So as soon as I put the text and then I sent them as a key, though that text was entered into the search box, into the search field. Okay, so now we learned how to interact with the element as well. As you can see, this was the first example of how you can find the element and interact with it. So you can send some text, and usually you hit enter, right? After you do this, you hit enter. You can do that too. So we will say search field submit. Search field submit, as if you're submitting the form. Okay, because this is like a form that you're completing, right? So search field submit, I will hit enter, and you can see the results are displayed, right? So this is one good example, a very, very simple example of how you can efficiently interact with the browser, right? So far, what we did was we automatically launched the browser. We automatically went to a particular web page, and we found the element, and we sent some information into that element, right? So let's do the same this time and then do it to another web page. So that's also going to be interesting. So what we're going to do is that we're going to go to our Swag Labs or Source Demo, that particular web page. Okay. And now we want to enter the username and password, and we want to click on login. Let's try to do that. Again, same pattern, same approach. Right click on the particular element that you want to interact with. Click inspect. And pay attention to that element. It's an HTML element. As we talked about earlier, those are the building blocks, like Lego blocks, of the web application. And this particular element here, it has an ID. ID is usually an attribute that uniquely identifies the element. Just like the other day when we were looking into the employee table, there was an employee ID column, right? And then I talked about social security number being a specific ID, unique ID of everyone in the country, right? So just like that, you have ID of an element that is usually used as something that's uniquely identifies the element. So let's try to use this ID attribute and then catch this element. Okay, so we're going to say username field. Okay, so username field, and same approach, browser dot find element by ID. Okay, so we want to find the element by ID, and ID, as you can see here, is user dash name. Okay, user dash name. So let's check our code. Username underscore field equals browser dot find element by ID and the ID name. There we go. That's done. Now let's do the same thing for password field. Okay, so password field browser dot find element again by ID. So what's the ID for password field? Let's take a look. ID for the password field, right below it, it's actually simply a password. Let's check our code one more time. So it's a password field, that's a name of the variable. We're making it equal to, and then finding the element right here, browser dot find element by ID password. Hit enter, that's also done. How about the login button? Let's find that as well. It's actually right here, right below that. Okay, so you can also search it like this and then hit enter, and you will see, you'll be able to find that element right here at the bottom. Let's call it as a login button. Let's call it as a login button. And the approach is the same, browser dot find element by ID. What's the ID here? Login button. Let's copy. Let's go ahead and copy this. And give me 1 second so that I can remove this right here. And we can place it right here. And let's check our code. Yep, we were able to pretty much place everything as expected. Now we can close this inspection and we can start interacting. Now we can start interacting with the elements. So first thing is username field dot send keys. Let's enter some text. For example, test. Hit enter. You see on the right hand side, you can see that we entered test right here, right? So how about I'm going to leave the password blank. I'm going to leave the password blank, and I will actually click the login, right? So we will say login button dot click. So click, as you can understand it yourself, it's just going to click on the login button. All right, so login button dot click, hit enter. You see what is the message that we received? We received a message that says password is required, right? Password is required. So this is usually a the moment when you pass or fail the test case, right? This is the moment you can make a decision. Okay, this is a good scenario. It's a good negative scenario. If I leave the password blank and hit login, right? I have some value in username, but password is blank. If I go ahead and then click on login, I should get password is required message, right? This particular message, password is required message, should come up. So this is a good time to take a screenshot. So let's try to take a screenshot as well. So browser dot to take a screenshot. It is also very straightforward. Save screenshot. And we need to give a name to the screenshot. We'll say blank password dot PNG, right? PNG is usually the extension of a screenshot. So pay attention to the left-hand side here. You see, I do not have any screenshot at the moment. So I will go ahead and click enter. And you should be able to see in the left-hand side that it just created a new screenshot here. See that? It just created a new screenshot. I'm going to click on it. And we should be able to see the content of the screenshot here as well. See that? This is the screenshot that we just took automatically using Python. All right. Okay. So now how about we're going to go ahead and we will actually log in successfully. Okay, so let's try to do that. So we have the log in, actually we have the username, right? Username field. We have the username field. We're going to send correct username this time. Correct username is right here. Now, before we send anything, because we already have a test there, we have to clear that too. See, everything is self-explanatory, basically. Well, most of the things I would say, right? Username field, clear. Let's clear. So now we can send keys. We can send keys and we'll put in the actual acceptable username. And for the password field, we will enter the correct password as well. We'll enter the correct password as well for the password field. As you can see, this is also entered. Now, next step is we'll click on the login button. So let's go ahead and click the login button. And as you can see, we have successfully logged in. We have successfully logged in. This is a moment you can also make a pass or fail type of comparison. This is something that we're definitely going to show you as part of the bootcamp, how to make assertions. We call them as assertions. This is the a way of making a decision in testing, whether you want to pass the test case or fail the test case. So far, as you can see, we were able to automatically interact with the browser. It's a cool stuff, right? And you can see that this is it is very self-explanatory. Of course, you know, you will be learning more complex stuff along the way, but if you study closely, and practice more, and then take it seriously and study consistently, you definitely have a great chance in the market, because again, market is very, very competitive. So you want to show your best out there. Okay, so especially these days, market is competitive, and test automation is highly in demand, and it will be so going forward.